Hello everyone, welcome to this video. Today we are going to discuss some important questions which can be asked into your client or manager level interview. Okay, so watch this video till the end and you will find some great input today. So let's begin with our first question, that is, how will you plan your test or how will you plan your testing? This question basically deals with how will you create your test plan. Test plan is a detailed document and it includes your test strategies, objectives, schedule, estimation, deadlines, and resources required to complete that particular project. And whenever we need to create a test plan, we need to focus on some of the points, which are, first one is analyze the product. Okay, so like who will be using this particular web application or this website, what is the use of this website, like is it for e-commerce or is it for a banking, is it for a healthcare. Likewise, the domain should be specific and how will it work, is it dependent of any third-party applications, like for payment, is it going to use some type of wallet like PhonePe, Google Pay or Paytm, PayPal, like that. So we also need to check out that how it will be working, what are the different modules in the particular web application. Second point is design the test strategy. Okay, so we need to be clear with testing objectives and the means to achieve them, how we are going to achieve those testing objectives. We also need to determine testing efforts and cost. Okay, testing efforts are nothing but the resources which are required for that particular project and what will be the overall cost of the project. These things we need to mention in your test strategy. Once the test strategy stage is completed, then we need to focus on test objective. Okay, so test objective deals with the goals and expected results of test execution. What are our testing goals and what are the expected result of that test execution? So a list of all software features, then what are the different functionalities, do we need GUI or what will be the performance standards, right? These parameters needs to be considered while creating our test plan. And what are the benchmarks of every aspect of software that needs to be testing, what is the highest limit that needs to be tested. This is all comes under your expected results. What are the results you are expecting? For example, if you are talking about any performance testing or load testing, so any streaming platform like nowadays Jio Cinema, everyone is watching IPL on Jio Cinema and the count of people who are live is above crores. Okay, so what are the expected results? So that website or that web application must have been tested for almost 2 crores or 2.5 crores people in the load testing. So these are nothing but your objectives. Then we have to define our test criteria. In test criteria we are having entry and exit criteria, suspension and reassumption criteria. So in entry criteria we define list of the things which we need before we start our testing. In exit criteria we define list of documents which we need to submit after our testing. Suspension criteria is the scenario or abnormal condition in which your testing will be stopped, and reassumption criteria is when these abnormal situations will be resolved and you can restart your testing. So these 4 criteria we mention in our test criteria. Then comes resource planning. So in resource planning we create a detailed breakdown of all resources required for project completion. This resource includes human effort, then what are different type of equipments we are going to need, what is the infrastructure is needed, right, to complete the testing. So this will be come under resource planning. Then we have to plan test environments. Test environments are nothing but combination of software and hardware we are going to use to complete the testing. Okay, or the combination of software and hardware testing team will be using. That will come under test environment. Then we are having schedule and estimation. So in every project management making a schedule is a common practice. Okay, by creating a solid schedule in the test planning, test manager can achieve the particular testing. So test manager generally uses these schedules and estimations to plan or to set timelines for that particular project. Okay, last but not the least, determine test deliverables. Test deliverables means what are the things we are going to deliver after testing. So these are some documents we need before we start our testing, like test plans, test cases, test designs, and these are the documents which we will be submitting after our testing is completed, which are test scripts, simulations. These are nothing but the evidences which we have generated after testing. Then we are having test data, test traceability matrix, error logs and execution logs. We also have test summary report, defect summary report. These are come under the test deliverables. So these are all the points which we mention in our test plan, or we need to focus on these points while creating our test plan. Analyze the product, design the test strategy, define test objective, define test criteria, resource planning, plan test environment, schedule an estimation, and determine test deliverables. Next question is, which fields did you see in test plan? So we have already discussed this. In test plan you will find test strategy, test objective, testing scope, level of testing. Here we mention that what are all the testings we are going to cover, then entry and exit criteria, suspension and reassumption criteria, resource planning, estimation, test deliverables, test requirements, defect management, etc. This will come under test plan. Next question is, how will you decide your testing is over? So whenever we are concluding our testing, we need to make sure that these points are achieved. Okay, what are these points? First one is, no high priority high severity defects are open. So all defects needs to be resolved, needs to be closed. Okay, no defect should be open. All critical functionalities are tested. The end-to-end testing is done, end-to-end flow is checked. Okay, all critical test cases are executed. So test cases which are related to critical functionalities needs to be executed and passed. And the last but not least, test deliverables are ready or not. So in test deliverables we are having all the documents like test summary report, test defect summary report, test closure report, test plan, etc. So all these documents should be ready. Once all these points are checked, we can say that our testing is over, our testing is concluded. Next question we are having is, if we update a module or functionality, then is it needed to check all functionalities, or you will just check particular functionality? So while development, if there is any change in functionality or a module, what will you do? Will you check all the functionalities, or you will only check that particular functionality? Okay, so whenever there is a change or update in functionality or module, we need to check if it's affecting any other critical functionalities, and for that we will perform regression testing. By performing regression testing, we will ensure that all other functionalities are working fine and new code change has no effect on them. We need to make sure of it. Next question we are having is, you know that your model will release in 6 months, then how will you plan your regression testing for the same? So if your model is getting released in 6 months, how will you plan your regression? So we need to figure out, as a tester, we need to figure out what are the critical functionalities and what are related test cases, and we need to prepare a suite which we called it as a regression suite. So regression suite will have all the test cases which are related to critical functionalities. So whenever there is a code change, we will execute this suite and we will check the results. Okay, so all critical functionalities should work properly and there should be no failure in the test cases. Whenever the build is moving from one environment to another environment, like maybe SIT to UAT, UAT to pre-prod, so whenever there is an environment change, again we have to execute the regression suite and check the results. Okay, and we should have a fixed timeline. we should have a fixed timeline that after this many days a regression suit should execute periodically, like after each sprint or in a month once we execute regression suit. It all depends on your requirement. So according to requirement we need to fix the timeline. This way you can answer this question. Next question is, what is a test coverage? So test coverage defined as a metric in software testing that measures amount of testing performed by set of tests. So whatever code you have written for testing, how many functionalities are getting tested using that code is nothing but your test coverage. How many percent of testing you have covered. Okay, it will include gathering information about which part of program are executed when running the test suite to determine which branches of conditional statements have been taken. Okay, so this is all about the code, how many code has been executed for that particular functionality. That is nothing but your test coverage. How will you decide when to automate the test cases and why? So whenever we start testing any application, okay, first we will start testing it manually. First we will write test cases, we will execute them manually, and then we will pass those test cases. Once we have our test case ready, then we can think of automation. So the question comes that which test cases will be automated. Okay, so we are having some criteria, like if the task is going to be repeated, if you are executing same set of test cases again and again, those should be automated, okay, to save your time and efforts. Second point is, if the requirement or the test cases are of low risk or stable or unlikely to change often. It means that if test cases on that functionality are not going to change, there are very less possibility that that functionality will have some update or code change. Such test cases we need to select. If there is often change in the requirement, then we cannot choose those test cases. Okay, because once we code, we should be able to run it multiple times. We should not need to change the code again and again. That will again increase our efforts, and automation we do to reduce human efforts. Okay, the test is subjected to human error. If there are test cases which may subject to human error, those tests can be automated. If the test cases are time consuming, for example you are executing the same test case for multiple set of test data, such test cases you can automate. Again, if the test cases are repetitive, then you need to automate. So these are some of the points which we consider while automating test cases. Next question is how to create a test strategy. This is again a very important question. So while creating test strategy, we need to focus on these of the points which we have already discussed above. Those are testing objective, testing guidelines, testing approach, roles and responsibilities of each member of the team, level of testing. Here we mention what are different testings we are going to execute. Then what are the test requirements? Test requirements consist of that build should be ready, test data should be ready, like that test environment should be ready. Then test deliverables. So in test deliverables we are having test plan, test closure report, test summary report, defect summary report, traceability matrix, test cases. Those all will come under test deliverables. And last but not the least, we are having entry and exit criteria. So we need to focus on these all points whenever we are creating test strategy. Then we are having some questions like how many test cases do you write in a day? Now it depends on individual person and the functionality or the feature they are testing. Okay, so some functionalities are having less story point or simple user stories, so those will not require much test cases. And if the functionality or a user story is for critical one, then you may need to write multiple test cases. Okay, so on an average we write 5 to 20 test cases for user story. The range is very high, 5 to 20, and still I have mentioned that it's not a correct number and may differ according to requirement. So it depends on individual tester what is the approach they are using to test that particular functionality. Accordingly they will write the test cases. Okay, for automation we can say that per day we create 2 to 3 test scripts. for automation. Next question we are having is, how many test cases do you execute in a day? So it's based on time availability and at which stage you are in testing. Okay, according to that you will execute test cases in a day. On an average we execute around 5 to 10 test cases manually. Okay, in automation, if there you have created a suit, then you just need to execute that particular suit, and within an hour or maybe 2 hour or a 3 hour, whatever amount of test cases you have added to that particular suit will get executed and the report will be generated. Next question we are having, that explain your team size. Now this is very common question which is asked in your client or manager round. So here you need to talk about your team which will be consist of your team lead basically. So other than your team lead, how many members are there in your team, and what are the different type of testings are performed in your team. Like someone are doing UI testing, someone are doing API testing, some resources are doing database testing, someone is into automation, someone is into regression, someone is into UAT. So you can explain about every person in your team that this type of testings we are performing in our team, and at the end you have to mention your responsibilities as well, that I am into API testing or I am into database testing and I work for these things, like that. You need to show what is your contribution in your team. That is very much important. It will leave some impact on the interviewer. Last but not the least, do you involve in scrum call and your contribution in that? So yes, as a tester we all are involved into scrum call. In scrum call we give update about our work allocation, that how many work is completed, and if there are any problems then we can discuss it into your scrum call. Talking about the contribution, so for contribution you can talk about the suggestion you might have given in the scrum call. Those suggestions could be about improving your testing process, or maybe improving communication between developer team and testing team for better understanding of the requirements. Okay, so this type of suggestions you can mention in your scrum call. So this way you can answer, do you involve in scrum call and what is your contribution in that. So these are some of important questions which we have covered today, and which are mostly asked into your client and manager level interview. Okay, so in part 1 I have covered 10 questions, in part 2 I have covered 13 questions, so total 23 questions are there, and I hope this will help you clear your manager or client round. I will attach this document in the description of the video. Please download this file and you can refer it for your further studies. If you like the video, do like, share and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.